there are a treasure trove of really, really cool old DOS games out there, and I've barely engaged with any of them so far. I mean, I've played Doom, obviously. I've played Another World. I've played Prince of Persia, and then I played this a long time ago because Anthropy wrote a little design article on it, so I decided to play it, and then I just kind of forgot about it for a long time, and then I went back, and then like a year and a half ago, I was wanting to make a video game that was a 2D platformer on space, and I was trying to figure out like how I wanted to present it. And for some reason, this game kind of came to mind as being something that maybe I could mimic and use as kind of an aesthetic model. There's a lot of nifty things about how this game presents itself that make it really unique to me. I really like this opening kind of assault on this fortress where you just kind of walk from left to right across the Martian surface, and it's all very static and natural, and then you suddenly get into this super dense electronic area where there's a lot more animation, a lot more green. The color palette itself is really, really cool. I like the reds and the browns, and then how the green contrasts really heavily with them. I believe it's just green, red, brown, and black are the only colors on the whole thing. And basically, this game is valuable to me because it helped me find an aesthetic for my game Fugitive. And it's kind of taught me this value of these kind of old screen-by-screen platformers that don't have any scrolling, where you're just going, where every level is its own little individual scene, and the static framing means you can kind of direct your focus towards specific things. Like, we saw that earlier with the descent downwards into the fortress. The fact that the camera is static meant that they could frame that symmetrically as opposed to something you just kind of walk up on. And I really like the ways that static cameras can make you give you a lot more control over where the screen is facing at a given time, and what the player is looking at. Basically, there's a lot more control there that you can give, and a lot more artistic direction. I think I remember watching a video of Oddworld, Abe's Odyssey, comparing it with the remake, and then talking about how removing the static camera just really changed that game a huge amount, probably for the worse visually. And that kind of stuff is super interesting to me. And that's obviously really important for stuff like Another World and cinematic platformers like Prince of Persia, but it's also kind of cool for games like Monuments to Mars, I think. And I feel like if you're just getting started learning, like, how do you want to make a platformer, this kind of restrained format is a really good way to kind of keep yourself focused. And it helped me a lot when I was making my first like large-scale platform thing. There's a bunch of different things going on these screens in Monuments to Mars that I haven't really explained at all. The arrows that I've collected a bunch of are just points, basically. And obviously those are spikes. And as you can see at the top of the screen, we have a limited number of shots. We've got you can see the little plus minus battery thing we can collect, and that gives us more bullets. And the key card is necessary to open the green slotted door that blocks every exit to every next level. And also, as you can see here, the game, I need exactly one bullet to be able to get through this level. So the game spawns me with one when I die as a countermeasure for getting stuck in an unwinnable situation, which I think is pretty clever. I really like the black backgrounds just as well. I think it makes the whole thing feel spacey and eerie. A lot of old NES games kind of had that going on. You can see how low the frame rate is compared with something like an NES game, and how that makes the whole experience a lot more kind of clunky. Clunky is one word. Yeah, it's clunky. The movement is not very unsmooth, and getting a hang of the jumping physics is kind of a challenge at first. And that reminds me a lot. It reminded me a lot of Kagiri Naki Tatakai in that sense, which is another game I've played a bunch of. Oop, there's a clever little jump. And so you can see we could just collect a lot more bullets. So really, I feel like this is a neat game for seeing action framed in a pretty traditional platformer setting. Like, there's nothing really like clever here mechanically. The only you got limited bullets and single jumps, and those are your only actions. I think probably one of the interesting ideas is the way that invisible tiles will trigger platform changes. You saw that with the way that platform extended when we walked into the other path, and and that could be really obnoxious, like in something like Milan's Secret Castle, but this game kind of directs you towards the spots that have the invisible switches in pretty smart ways, which makes it a lot more just feasible to accomplish. And the enemies all have really simple kind of patterns to them, and so this is just a really sharp tool for developing game designers, I think. Like, much more so than like Super Mario Brothers, which is so big and complex and has a ton of way more levels and way more elements going on and has all the scrolling and the secrets. I feel like this teaches you a number of ways to approach designing a simple platformer and making it kind of compelling. That's kind of the value that this game has for me, as just kind of a teaching tool for how to take a very small number of design elements in this kind of format and use it to tell kind of a interesting story. And there's a number of really clever little storytelling beats in this game that were really what compelled me about it, and kind of what made me want to kind of rip it off a little bit for my game Fugitive. Was just like the beginning where you're walking to the right and the way the game directs you downwards into the fortress. If the game just started you off in the fortress, that would be a completely different feel to how the game progressed. You have that very slow, very static build up beginning in the future. Wow, I'm spending a long time in this level. Building up to the actual inside of the fortress, and as a result, it has a lot more kind of impact to it when you do go inside very early on. And when the game comes around at the end and you leave the fortress, it's also more impactful because of the symmetry with the beginning. And all of those little lessons are things that I kind of incorporated into Fugitive and then later on with some of my other work. Like, also there's another screen in Monuments of Mars that you're just flowing straight down, and there's electricity on the walls that doesn't really hurt you as long as you're just going straight down, and there are some monsters you can't even interact with. It's just there for texture, it's just there for storytelling flow and giving the game a more interesting shape, which I think are really, really valuable lessons for new game designers, and just especially for me, because that's the stuff that really, really interests me about these kind of games. And I do quite like the shapes of the individual levels, like this one. I like how the whole thing just kind of draws your attention to this big slide, which winds up being like the centerpiece of this puzzle. And the green droplets, as far as I can tell, are just totally random elements. But the game always sets you just far enough away from them that you can still that it's still fair, that you can dodge them properly if you are careful enough. It's a really slow and strategic game in general, which I think fits because of the kind of clunky nature of DOS platformers in general, at least especially early on, like right now. Like this game, the controls are pretty, like I said, they are pretty jittery just because of the low frame rate. So focusing less on like really twitchy platforming sections and more on like resource management and knowing how to approach a situation makes a lot more sense. There's a number of really cool looking DOS platformers that I haven't checked out yet. The one I'm most interested in is Jill of the Jungle, which actually does have scrolling, but like a lot of the DOS platformers, the really interesting thing is it's the shape of the levels, because a lot of these games have a very, very different feel from stuff like Super Mario or other Japanese games, because they've just developed in a different kind of ecosystem. Like with Japanese games, a bunch of the platformers descend from Super Mario Brothers, and a lot of them descend from that tradition. But when you're playing something that just was made on a completely different continent, things can be a lot weirder. Like Jill of the Jungle is a lot weirder than NES platformers, and that's a big part of what makes these kind of games interesting, is just coming at things from a very different perspective. And with Monuments of Mars, it's that jittery, computery, single screen aesthetic, and just the 4 colors, and just the kind of simplicity of it all. But also just how kind of full up these screens are with different info. When I tried to copy this aesthetic for my game, for Fugitive, I did just a couple of things differently. I added a whole lot more screens and made them a lot less dense, because I kind of wanted to feel like it was going across a larger area. So instead of having like 20 screens in this episode that are all packed and challenging on their own right, I would have like 5 screens. I would have like I had like, I don't know, 80 or something, or 100, and as a result, it was much more spaced out. And it also made it so that I could make the borders on this game, the borders, which borders lead to the exit and which ones are just walls, is ambiguous. Like, these are empty bordered spaces that are not walls, that are walls. And then, but the one in the top right hand corner leads to the exit. And that's an ambiguity introduced by trying to squeeze as much information onto the screen as possible. So by spreading out the game and by trying to pack in less, I kind of made it feel a little more natural by adding walls that, by making it just so clearly that if there's an empty space on the corner of the screen, then you can definitely head to another screen. And also making it just ever so slightly less linear by allowing you to go across a couple different screens, sometimes having multiple exits, which also changes the feel of it a lot. And just also generally making it move more smoothly, which is just tremendous for this kind of game. And also I stripped it down way further in a bunch of ways. Like I took out the limited shots, I took out all the key cards and score and everything, which kind of simplified the game a lot in a way, which just looking at it right now, it seems really simple, but just to kind of create the dramatic effect I just wanted to strip out even more of those kinds of elements of just key cards, and the invisible squares that activate bridges and stuff are all stuff that I took out for when I was envisioning this kind of game. So the real lessons that I took away from Monuments of Mars was just basically that really common lesson about limitations enforcing creativity. Just a super limited color palette can be helpful to creating a nice effect. A static camera can be really helpful for creating, just guiding the player's attention in strategic ways towards different aspects of the level. Like, look at this screen. Look at the shape of it. Look at the big beaker in the center, and how much less interesting this would be with a scrolling camera. It just would not have the same effect. And that almost tore me apart when I made my game Ants, because I was so devoted to that single screen look and trying to make every screen different looking that I didn't realize it made the game play really shittily. But limitations can enforce creativity, and I think for beginning game designers, if you want to make something kind of mechanic-y and designy like this, then you could do really well playing a game like Monuments of Mars or something similar, and trying to figure out what lessons you want to take away from it, because that was really helpful for me. And I think maybe find I can link the old anthropy design article I read, and that just made this game sound super interesting. So check it out, check out the game. Thanks for watching.